Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified. Today, let us take up some of the important news from New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 31st July 2023. These are the list of the news for today's discussion, and their timestamp has been provided in the YouTube description. So, on this note, let's start our discussion from UPSC prelims and mains point of view. Now, let's start our discussion with this important news on page number 6, and it says on merits. Following the Supreme Court bail order, Bhima Koregaon case needs a relook. And the bail order of the Supreme Court is with respect to Section 43D Clause 5 of UAPA, that is Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967. And this provision talks about granting bail. However, getting bail under this provision is slightly difficult. So this topic becomes important, particularly from the perspective of GS Paper 3 regarding the aspects of internal security challenges, and also from the perspective of your prelims examination with respect to rights issues. So here we are going to talk about grant of bail under UAPA, particularly Section 43D Clause 5, and also the impact on individuals' right, particularly the fundamental right as provided under Article 14 and also 21 of the Indian Constitution. Now, in this particular Supreme Court case, that is Vernon versus State of Maharashtra, the Supreme Court has given bail to two accused. So it says that the Supreme Court in its bail order observed that human rights defenders Vernon Gonzalez and Arun Ferreira were both held in jail even when no material has been demonstrated by NIA, that is National Investigative Agency, before the court that the appellants or these two accused are members of the terrorist organization. So basically the court says that the NIA has not been able to provide material evidence based on which the Supreme Court can exactly say or clearly say the two accused are members of terrorist organization. So in this article, let us understand what has been provided under this particular provision, namely 43D Clause 5 of UAPA, and also the inconsistent judgment of the Supreme Court, on one hand giving a narrow or strict interpretation of the provision, and also on the other hand providing an opportunity for grant of bail. Now, in another important case, that is Yadala Subbarao versus Union of India, the Supreme Court has said that denial of bail need not be the norm under Section 43D Clause 5 of UAPA. So here let us understand about this particular provision of UAPA. So according to this provision, that is Section 43D Clause 5, if a person is accused under Chapter 4 or Chapter 6 of UAPA. Now Chapter 4 provides for punishment for terrorist activities, and Chapter 6 provides for terrorist organization and individuals. So if any person has been accused under these two chapters or any of the provisions which fall under these two chapters of UAPA, then generally they shall not be released on bail unless the court is satisfied. Now this satisfaction of the court will depend on the police diary or the investigation reports submitted by the police. So if the police has not done their work properly, or if the investigation report has any lapses, then there are chances that the accused can get bail under this stringent provision of UAPA. So the provision highlights that if the court is of the opinion that there are reasonable grounds to believe that the accusation is prima facie true. Now these terms highlights the subjective nature of the provision. That is, it depends upon the opinion of the judge. And based on any report or investigation provided by the police, if the court is satisfied that there are certain reasonable grounds to believe that the accusation of the charges leveled against the accused under UAPA is prima facie true, then bail can be denied. So because of the subjectivity with respect to this particular provision, granting or getting bail under this provision becomes extremely difficult for the accused. And this is what has been highlighted by the Supreme Court, as it says that despite 5 years of these two persons being incarcerated, that is in the jail, the NIA has not been able to provide material evidence to suggest that these two members are members of terrorist organization. Now, getting bail under Section 43D Clause 5 of UAPA has also been difficult because of inconsistent judicial decisions. And this inconsistency has further deprived the fundamental rights under Article 21 and 14 of the Indian Constitution. So in this backdrop, let's look into these two important Supreme Court judgments. The first judgment is National Investigative Agency versus Zahoor Ahmad Shah Watali. In this, the court provided a rather narrower interpretation of Section 43D Clause 5 of UAPA and mentioned that the burden to prove innocence is on the accused. So this means that it is upon the accused to prove his innocence. Now this becomes extremely difficult because that will depend on the police diary or the investigation report which is submitted by the police to the court, and then the court will frame their opinion. So there is very less scope for the accused to prove their innocence. However, this situation was remedied in this Supreme Court judgment, namely Thawaha Faisal versus Union of India, as the Supreme Court provided a rather liberal interpretation of the same provision of UAPA. And the court highlighted that mere association with terrorist organization is not enough to prove offense under UAPA unless the association and support were with intention of furthering terrorist activities. And even in the case of Yedala Subbarao versus Union of India, the Supreme Court held that it was not able to form an opinion that the accusation made against the accused under UAPA provisions were prima facie true. So ultimately, it boils down to the opinion which is formed by the Supreme Court or the High Court. And hence the Supreme Court here also highlighted that embargo imposed on granting bail under Section 43D Clause 5 of UAPA will not apply because according to the court's opinion, the accusations made against the accused under UAPA were not true. Now coming to this case of Vernon versus State of Maharashtra and others, the Supreme Court also highlighted the importance of Article 21 and also Article 14 of the Indian Constitution with respect to continued detention. So the court said that if the prosecution or the police is not able to prove allegation or the accusation, then the continued detention impacts or restricts a citizen's fundamental right under Article 14 and 21 of the Indian Constitution. And here the court highlighted the fact that almost 5 years have lapsed since these two were taken into custody. So the court held that they are satisfied that the appellants have made out a case for granting bail. Allegations against them no doubt are serious, but for that reason alone, bail cannot be denied to them. So this is the reason which has been provided by the Supreme Court with respect to ensuring their fundamental right under Article 14 and 21 of the Indian Constitution. Now based on this, let's go through these two questions asked in the prelims examination of 2021. The question was, which one of the following factors constitutes the best safeguard of liberty in a liberal democracy? Options were A committed judiciary, B, centralization of powers, C, elected government, and D, separation of powers. In this, the correct answer is D, that is separation of powers. Now look into this question. With reference to India, consider the following statements. First, judicial custody means an accused is in the custody of the concerned magistrate and such accused is locked up in police station and not in jail. Now this statement is false because in a judicial custody, the person is not locked in the police station but rather he is sent to jail. Second statement highlighted that during judicial custody, the police officer in charge of the case is not allowed to interrogate the suspect without approval of the court. This statement is correct. So according to Article 22 of the Indian Constitution, any accused has to be produced before the magistrate or the court within 24 hours. And it is up to the magistrate whether that person is sent to police custody or that person is sent to judicial custody. So it is based on this basic aspects of Article 22 and the situation of custody. This particular question was asked by UPSC in the prelims of 2021. And this question was asked on the safeguards of liberty as provided in the Constitution of India. So the question here is, which of the statements given above are correct? So here the correct answer becomes B, that is 2 only. Thus this article becomes important both from the perspective of rights issue under prelims examination and also security aspect under GS paper 3. Now let's take up our next article for discussion appearing in the editorial section and also appearing in the text and context section on page number 8. So this news highlights about a petition which has been filed in the Supreme Court by National Federation of Indian Women, which has asked the Ministry of Home Affairs and 6 respective state governments as to why the guidelines issued by the Supreme Court in the famous Tehseen Poonawalla versus Union of India judgment has not been implemented. Now, in the Tehseen Poonawalla judgment, the Supreme Court issued guidelines with respect to preventive measures, remedial measures, and punitive measures to tackle the problem of mob lynching. And based on this editorial also highlights that rap on the knuckles. Supreme Court has tried to hold states and center to account on mob violence. So according to the Supreme Court, ultimately it is the accountability of the center and respective state governments. Now, this news highlights that the Tehseen Poonawalla judgment of the Supreme Court held that it was sacrosanct duty of the state to protect the lives of its citizens. It also declared that the authorities of the states have the principal obligation to see that any vigilantism does not take place. And another important aspect highlighted in the editorial is regarding the correlation with fraternal relations or with the concept of fraternity as highlighted in the preamble of India. So the editorial highlights that it requires no less than concerted civil society action to tackle the menace of mob violence and vigilantism by sensitizing people towards fraternal relations with the other communities and avoiding typecasting them as the other. So the aspect of fraternal relations among individuals has also been highlighted. So in this analysis, let us understand those preventive, remedial and punitive measures as highlighted by the Supreme Court in this famous Tehseen Poonawalla judgment, and also the importance of sensitizing people towards fraternal relations towards other communities and religion. Now, starting with the concept of fraternity as highlighted in the preamble, it says that fraternity assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. So two aspects has been highlighted in the Indian preamble regarding fraternity. One is the dignity of the individual and second is unity and integrity of the nation. And on this note, even the Tehseen Poonawalla judgment has mentioned about this important aspect of fraternal relations. So it highlights that unity in diversity must be recognized as the most potent weapon in India's armory, which binds different and varied kinds of people in the solemn thread of humanity. So this idea of unity in diversity binds diverse kinds of people or binds the diversity of India in a solemn thread of humanity. It says that this diversity is the strength of our nation, and for realizing this strength, it is sine qua non, that is, it cannot be dispensed with, or it is essential that we sustain it and shun schismatic tendencies or diverging or disagreeing tendencies. Further, this unique feature of fraternity, highlighting unity in diversity, also inculcates in citizens the virtue of respecting the opinions and choices of others. And such respect of varied opinions of different people imbibes the feeling of acceptance of plurality and elevates the idea of tolerance by promoting social cohesion and infusing a sense of fraternity and comity. Now, this paragraph provided in the Tehseen Poonawalla judgment can be used if a question is asked by UPSC in the polity section to write a 10-marker question on fraternity. The Supreme Court, elaborating further on this notion of fraternity, also highlighted that it is the responsibility of the states to prevent untoward incidents and to prevent crime. So, based on these ideas of fraternal relations or the importance of fraternity as provided under the Indian preamble, let's understand or let's go through the preventive, remedial, and punitive measures as highlighted in the Tehseen Poonawalla judgment to restrict or to reduce incidents of mob lynching. So first, let's discuss the preventive measure as suggested by Supreme Court. The most important point, which has also been highlighted in the newspaper, is that to designate a nodal officer who is not below the rank of Superintendent of Police by respective state governments. So a nodal officer must be instituted or designated by respective state governments, and such nodal officer shall be assisted by one DSP rank officer in the district to take effective measures to prevent such incidents of mob violence or lynching. The second important point highlighted under preventive measure is to create or constitute special task force to procure intelligence on cases of mob lynching which might happen in the respective area or in certain vulnerable area. So the special task force can inquire into certain hate speeches which are being given in the district, or any provocative statements which are made against any caste or any community. The third point under the preventive measures is to identify the vulnerable areas in which more such incidents takes place. So it says that the state government shall identify or such areas where instances of lynching or mob violence have been reported in the past, or such instances are more frequent. The next point highlighted is that nodal officer to hold regular meetings with the local intelligence units in the district along with all station house officers of the district, that is SHOs. Now the idea is to identify existence of such tendencies of vigilantism or mob violence or lynching which can take place in such area. Further, also to identify and eradicate hostile environment in the vulnerable area. Such environment can be created against any community or caste which can be targeted in such instances. Further, as a part of preventive measures, the DGP of the state needs to take stock of the situation from district officials so that the senior officials are regularly updated about the situation on the ground. And in this aspect, the DGP shall also issue a circular to the Superintendent of Police with regard to police patrolling in the sensitive areas. So, there is a need to constantly patrol such sensitive areas, or the presence of police officials acts as a deterrent measure against such instances of mob lynching. Further, the Home Ministry also needs to coordinate with respective state governments to sensitize the law enforcement agencies, not only to prevent instances of mob lynching or mob violence, but also to implement the constitutional goal of social justice and rule of law, and also to inculcate or imbibe the idea of fraternity among the local population, and also to create awareness against the evil of mob lynching. So these are some of the preventive measures which has been suggested by the Supreme Court. Now coming to the remedial measures, the Supreme Court highlighted that FIR, that is first information report, should be filed without delay to register such instances of mob violence. Another remedial measure is to intimate nodal officer about the various stages of investigation so that the investigation process is carried out effectively and such investigation reports are filed without delay by the police officials. Further, the state must provide compensation to the victims or the dependents in cases of victims' death. And to compute the amount of compensation, state government shall give due regard to the nature of injury done to the body, psychological injury, loss of earning including loss of opportunities of employment or education, and also expenses which has been incurred on legal or medical expenses. Further, the cases of mob lynching needs to be tried by fast track court for early completion of the trial. The court has also highlighted that there is a need to award maximum sentence to ensure deterrence among citizens against the offense of mob lynching. Further, other safety measures also needs to be incorporated, such as concealing the identity and address of the witness so that the trial is not impacted in any manner, and the victims should also receive legal aid through NALSA. So these are some of the remedial measures as has been suggested in the Tehseen Poonawalla judgment. Now coming to the punitive measures, and as a part of punitive measures, those officials who neglect their duty or because of such officers' conduct, the prevention of such mob lynching could not take place. Action must be taken against those erring officers. Further, the state government should also take disciplinary action against erring officials. And according to the Supreme Court judgment in Arumugam Sarvai versus State of Tamil Nadu, the states are directed to take disciplinary action against concerned official if it is found that such official or group of officials did not prevent the incident despite having prior knowledge of such instances, or where the incident has already been occurred, such officials did not promptly apprehend and institute criminal proceedings against the culprits. That is, despite the fact that mob lynching has occurred, yet the police did not take appropriate measures, such as there was delay in filing of FIR, or the victim was not given medical aid in due course of time, because of which resulted in their death. So these are some of the preventive, remedial and punitive measures as has been highlighted by the Supreme Court in the Tehseen Poonawalla judgment. So both these news becomes very important from the perspective of GS paper 2 under governance and also social justice, and also under GS paper 3 with respect to security. And questions in your mains examination can be directly asked with respect to the Supreme Court judgment highlighting the preventive, remedial and punitive measures as suggested by the Supreme Court to prevent instances of mob violence or mob lynching. Let's take up the next news appearing on page number 7 in the editorial section. And this news highlights hurdles to overcome becoming digital India. So this article talks about the concerns or the gaps with respect to digital transactions which is taking place in the country. And it highlights that while digital transactions have increased substantially, India's performance is unimpressive compared to other developing countries. So, other developing countries, in terms of digital transactions, the percentage of population doing such transaction is much higher as compared to India. And this aspect has been highlighted in this particular article. Now, according to PIB, during the last 5 years, various easy and convenient modes of digital payments have been introduced by the Government of India, such as Bhim UPI or Bharat Interface for Money Unified Payments Interface, Immediate Payment Service, and National Electronic Toll Collection. So these three have registered substantial growth. Despite this fact, this article highlights certain gaps not only with respect to inactive accounts but also rural urban divide in terms of digital transactions. Now, the report of PIB highlights that these mode of payments have registered substantial growth and have transformed digital payment ecosystem by increasing these two aspects, namely person to person transaction and person to merchant transaction. And overall, Bhim UPI has emerged as the preferred payment mode for the citizens of this country. And according to NPCI, that is National Payments Corporation of India, it highlights that UPI payments has seen significant growth in India since its launch in 2016 by NPCI, that is National Payments Corporation of India. And this graph highlights that significant growth in terms of digital transactions in India. Now, there are certain benefits with respect to digital transactions which has been initiated by the government. These includes instant and convenient mode of payment, as there is hardly any delay. This has resulted in enhanced financial inclusion because of penetration of digital transactions even in the rural areas. Increasing digital transaction has increased transparency in government system by reducing leakage and ghost recipients, as these amounts are mainly used for social security benefits by government transfers or such transfers made by the government to ensure certain welfare schemes. Next, it has improved speed and timely delivery for such transactions. Further, the NETC or National Electronic Toll Collection System enables easy financial access at toll plazas on the highway, and this has also reduced severe jams which we used to witness earlier at the toll plazas. Further, the Bharat Bill Payment System provides an interoperable and easy accessible bill payment service to consumers via multiple channels such as internet banking, mobile apps, Bhim UPI, etc. Further, the digital transaction has also enhanced credit access, as digital transaction history can be utilized by the banks or financial institutions to provide credit. And overall, these transactions are safe and secure, as it requires multiple levels of authentication for making these financial transactions. So these can be said to be some of the benefits of enhanced or increased digital transaction in the country. Despite this fact, there are certain concerns which has been highlighted in this article. And one of the major concerns highlighted is with respect to the inactive accounts, as many accounts were opened on the account of Jan Dhan Yojana. So the news highlights that with respect to inactive accounts, the male members have 23% inactive accounts, whereas female members have 32% of inactive accounts. So largely the inactive accounts are of female members as compared to the male members. Now, when we talk about inactive accounts in the rural urban divide, then in the rural areas 31% of the accounts are inactive, whereas in the urban areas only 23% of the accounts are inactive. Another aspect of inactive accounts is that among the poorest 40% of the population, 35% of the 40% have inactive accounts, whereas among the richest 60% of the population, 22% of the 60% richest population, they have inactive accounts. So these are some of the data with respect to inactive accounts. The second point highlighted here is with respect to the rural urban divide, and this can also be seen with respect to the aspect of inactive accounts. Next point highlighted is rich poor divide. The fourth point is overall percentage of population using digital transaction is still less when we compare our transaction with that of other countries. And this aspect has been clearly highlighted in this second chart, as it provides a comparison of digital transactions of India with Bangladesh, Brazil, China, Kenya, and Vietnam. So, according to the statistics, in the year 2021, 41% of the male members carried any digital transaction, whereas only 28% of the female members carried any digital transaction. So, again, the digital transaction being done by female are comparatively less as done by the males. Now, when we compare this scenario with other countries such as Brazil, China, Kenya, or Vietnam, the percentage of women or females participating in digital transaction is much higher as compared to India. As in Brazil, the percentage of women involved in digital transaction was 73%, in China it was 85%, and in Kenya it was 74%. So when we compare these statistics with that of India, then we lag much behind in terms of overall digital transaction taking place in the country. So the next point highlighted is gender divide, as less females in India are using digital mode of payments. The next gap highlighted is comparison with other countries, as has been highlighted in second chart, and also the concern is with respect to mobile phone accessibility, as in most of the rural areas women do not have accessibility to mobile phone. The accessibility of mobile phone for women is much lower as compared to men, and at times women also have to depend on men for mobile connectivity or for mobile access. So this article suggests that the gaps with respect to digital transactions when compared with other countries such as Brazil, China, or even Kenya needs to be filled. So while India has made big strides with respect to digital transaction, it still has a long way to go in becoming digital India as suggested by this particular article. Now, based on our discussion, this becomes your practice question for your mains examination. The question is, the emergence of the digital revolution in the payment ecosystem has initiated financial inclusion in India. Critically examine. And this question carries 15 marks and needs to be answered within 250 words. Thus, this article becomes important, particularly from the perspective of GS Paper 3 under Indian economy and also GS Paper 2 with respect to the aspect of social justice. Now let's take up this news appearing in the text and context section on page number 8. And this news talks about WorldCoin project. Now this WorldCoin project basically scans the iris of an individual, and once the iris of an individual is scanned, then an ID is generated. And in exchange for the scan of the iris, the individual along with a world ID is also given a cryptocurrency referred as WorldCoin. So the key highlight of the WorldCoin project is that it is a global financial and identity network based on the proof that you are a human being. And this proof is being done through the retina scan, which is done by this machine known as the Orb. So it highlights that this project aims to create digital authentication for human beings across this world. And this will be done by scanning of the iris or retina of the eyes. And through the scanning of the retina of the eyes, a world ID will be generated or a crypto ID will be generated for the individual. Now this itself rings the alarm bell of privacy concerns, because there is an institution which is collecting iris in the database without any governmental regulation. And these iris can be misused for n number of purposes, as it not only has privacy concerns, but it also has security concerns. So two main concerns with respect to this project which are raised are privacy concerns and security concerns. It further says that this world ID, which is generated by scanning of the iris, will help to prove human beings' identity in the age of artificial intelligence. And as an altruistic measure, the project highlights that it intends to provide universal basic income to those who identify themselves. And on this note, the website of World Project highlights that World ID is a digital passport that lets you prove that you are a unique and real person in the age of AI while remaining anonymous. Now, this is the constituents of the orb, and it highlights that the orb consists of two hemispheres separated by the main board, which is tilted at 23.5 degree, the angle of the rotational axis of the Earth. The main board holds a powerful computing unit to enable local processing for maximum privacy. This is the main board of the orb. And regarding the mechanics of the orb as to how it functions, so it says that once the shell is removed, the orb can be divided into four core parts. These four core parts are: in the front, the optical system, which captures the iris; in the middle, the main board, which separates the device into two hemispheres. So this main board separates the device into two hemispheres, and its inclination is exactly at 23.5 degree, which is also equivalent to the inclination of the rotational axis of the Earth. The third core part is at the back, which is the main computing unit as well as the active cooling system. And the fourth part is the bottom part, an exchangeable battery. So these are the four basic part or the four core parts of the orb. Now, number of concerns, particularly privacy and security concerns, has been raised with respect to this project. However, the WorldCoin has highlighted that it is fully compliant with Europe's General Data Protection Regulation, and hence there is no issue of privacy. And it has also highlighted that individuals who want to receive a World ID by scanning their iris are not required to share their name, phone number, email address, or even home addresses. And images collected by the orb are used to generate a unique iris code. So it says that by default, these images are immediately deleted once the iris code is created, unless the user opts into data custody. Now, another concerns raised with respect to this project includes security of biometric data and potential misuse for other purposes, sharing of iris scan with multiple vendors, security agencies, and even non-state actors. Further, lack of regulation for such a project across the globe, including India, and doubts are also raised on the value and utility of this entire project. Now, this news interestingly highlights that there are centers in the malls, even in Delhi or Bangalore, where citizens can register themselves for this World ID. Now, this topic of WorldCoin project becomes important both from your prelims and also mains perspective with respect to science and technology. Now let's take up the next news for discussion appearing on page number 10, and this news is with respect to the location of Cocos Island on the map. So this news highlights that two Indian military aircraft visit Australia's strategic Cocos Island. The planes were at Cocos Island for a week, which can be an important base for refueling and operational turnaround for Indian armed forces. Now this is important given the backdrop of China. So it highlights that India aims to increase its military to military engagement and also deepening interoperability in the region. Now if you look at the map, this is where the location of Cocos Island or Keeling Islands is in the southern Indian Ocean. And Cocos Islands or Keeling Islands comprise of Horsburgh Island, Direction Island, Home Island, South Island, and West Island. So please remember these names and also the location of Cocos Island, as it is closer to Indonesia as well. So from the perspective of the location of Cocos Island, let's look at some important highlights. So it mentions about strategic importance of Cocos Island. First, it acts as a strategic maritime choke points. So the purpose is to expand the strategic outreach of Indian military and also improve their interoperability in the southern Indian Ocean. And in this regard, an Indian Navy Dornier maritime patrol aircraft and Indian Air Force C-130 transport aircraft visited Australia's Cocos Island in the southern Indian Ocean. And its location is important as it acts as a strategic maritime choke points, as it is also close to Indonesia and the Malacca Strait. It further highlights that Cocos Island can be an important base for refueling and operational turnaround for the Indian military. Further, it can also act as a space for cooperation between the space agencies. So it says that Cocos Islands have been a point of cooperation between the space agencies of the two countries, that is ISRO and ASA or Australia Space Agency, and India's access to CKI and Christmas Island. Now this is the location of Christmas Island, which is also in the southern Indian Ocean, which is even closer to strategic choke points, has also been under discussion. So questions can be asked based on location with respect to Cocos Island or Christmas Island of Australia, and both these islands are located in the southern Indian Ocean. So with this discussion, we come to an end to today's analysis. Thank you for watching DNS.